This is Jim Peters with Peters Principals, and today we have the superintendent session with Dr. Salah Kalfawi. Doctor, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
And how's it going after 10 months?
Good.
that good, huh?
Yeah, it's going well. It's going well. It's a good job. It's a great city. Lots of support all around, and lots of interest in our schools. Good things. Good things.
Did you hear? Have you heard anything about the high school yet?
Yes and no. I mean, we're still. I mean, we've done completed a couple of the earlier steps, such as appointing the first engineering firm that's going to represent us,
okay,
and so forth, and had a couple serious meetings, but not yet in terms of feasibility study. Where is it going to go? That's still too soon.
That's still too soon.
Yeah.
On the way out, when we were preparing, I met Mr. Martin from the high school.
Yep, we were meeting.
And he was stating that it looks like 2 years.
Yeah, that's what I think it still looks like. Quite a while.
So it's a progress. It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. Yeah.
Okay. It's budget season.
It is.
And I remember when my father was a superintendent, watching him go through the budget and actually having a school committeeman who was not friendly to him say, well, if we're going to give raises to the assistant superintendents, we need to give a raise to the superintendent. So my father got a raise out of the deal, and he was pleased, but
that's good.
Didn't expect it. What's budget season like for you?
Well, we started a few weeks ago. As soon as we know what the level of funding is from the state and the city, we start usually the budget season. We have from the states roughly $3.1 million higher,
okay,
than this current year. And then from the city, we are receiving $1 million. $506.20 of it is really to immediately go fund an increase in transportation. So that's really not for our budget, because we're just a pass-through. We
right.
pay the bill of transportation
right.
for the city. So we have roughly 3.1 plus 400 and some. So we're looking at about between 3.5 and 3.6 million more this year than last year. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty good. That really helped us tremendously. Great. Really, we're grateful to both the city and the state for that contribution, because that relieved a great deal of headaches for us. And we don't have to cut as many cuts. We don't have to do as many cuts as we had to do. We did have to have some additions that are needed in the budget, and in that, along with of course the salary, all the additions, all the contract negotiations that were successfully completed last time around to catch up for FY15 and 16. That comes, of course, to be repeated in FY17. Mm-hmm. Once you give an increase, the increase stays for FY17. So all in all, we still had to do some cuts. We had to do some serious cuts. So we focused on our priorities being that we wanted to be away from the classroom as much as we can. Mm-hmm. And I think we stayed pretty true to that. We do have a couple of exceptions, and that's really retirements that are happening in the high school, and we'll be taking advantage of those 3 retirements and not replacing. But I think the meeting just prior, that's why you saw Mr. Martin here, is we were looking at the effect of that. If you don't replace those retirements, what would the effect be on the class sizes of the remaining sections? And the effect is pretty negligible. We're still talking, the class sizes in our high school are definitely still among the lowest throughout all the schools. And that's usually the case in high schools anyway. But we're confident that we're not impacting at all seriously the class sizes. So that's about the only thing. Everything else is either administrative supports or administrative positions and things like that. So we feel pretty good about it. And even those that we cut, because we're such a large system and we have so many openings, that a lot of them, because of their qualifications and certifications, can reapply immediately for another position within the system. I think at this point we might have only like one person still not finding the right fit. So all in all, for a system of our size, that's probably the best you can deliver in terms of a budget.
One person not finding the right fit.
And I'm pretty confident with all that person is qualified to teach as a
Right.
as a teacher, and I'm sure we have several openings coming up, and that person may elect to none of them is obligated to do that, but the person may elect to remain with us as a teacher, applying for a teaching position.
Okay. How do you? I'm just curious about. I'm curious about ESL and reading. How do you do? We get grants for reading teachers?
We do get, as you know, our budget has a very large portion of it is grant, very significant portion of it is grant. We receive several $million of grants. I mean, had it not been because of these grants, then we would be facing some serious challenges. No, we do have grants. We have some grants. We just got some help here and there. None of them is, they don't replace your budget, but they certainly help tremendously.
So they enhance your budget?
Absolutely. A lot of the reading, the school improvement grants, some of them even help you in the administration of the schools. Grants help us everywhere, help us with students, direct services, help us in supplies, help us in growth in many areas. And ELL is one of them.
Right.
So yes, we rely on the grants. And
Okay.
we're expecting and building our budgets on the same level of grants. And some of them we're already confirmed we'll be getting anyway. A lot of them we call them grants, but they're really entitlement grants,
Right.
which is based on, and they're not necessarily competitive grants. We do have some competitive grants that we got, but some of them are not necessarily competitive grants, they're entitlement grants.
Okay. And the difference between an entitlement grant and a competitive grant is?
Well, an entitlement grant might be based on your economics of the city, the makeup of your community, where given that you will be entitled to this many funds, say they take whatever is available in the state, or sometimes it's would be the federal case, and then they would give you your allocation of that based on whether your economics, socioeconomics, and so forth. And we call them grant. Why aren't they part of the budget then? Because the money is not necessarily guaranteed year after year. It's not like your foundation budget. And in the most significant ones, we've already gotten the word that they'll pretty much continue the same as is. The competitive grant is different. Sometimes it could be state, private, federal. It doesn't really matter what the source is. It's something you have to apply for. And if you're lucky and you make it, you will get a grant. If not, you don't. And it's a little iffy, more iffy than your entitlement grants.
Sounds like it is.
Yeah, it is.
Sounds
You have
more
to
iffy.
apply for it, and you have to convince them, and you have to compete with so many other districts that apply. We've been successful in getting a few, and obviously, as you would expect, we have been unsuccessful in getting some others.
Right. Okay. What are the important pieces of the budget going forward?
Well, I think the current budget that we have, the important is that first of all, we're maintaining, as I said, whatever we build up, all the strengths and growth that we had is being maintained. There are no serious challenges or threats to any part of the budget, particularly in the delivery part of it, which is really the most important part, delivery of the curriculum and student services. So that remains the same. That's a very important one. The other important part of it is we did manage to squeeze in some additions in ELL, because I think we're falling so far behind that we can't catch up all at once. It's not going to happen. According to the numbers, we could use 22 more teachers in ELL, but we're not going to be able to do that. So we have to build a plan to do it over several years. And I think we're really doing really well. In this budget, we have 5 more positions. So that to me is a really important aspect of our budget. Another very important aspect of our budget is the SPED department is real, special education department. It's really working very, very hard in trying to contain our costs and save money to the city. And so they've put plan after plan, idea after idea, working hard to retain more students in district, and by the same token, give them the best service possible. I know that those that we retain within the district, we give them as good a service, if not better, than those that we send out. So it's not like that we're keeping them for, with the compromise. We're not compromising on the quality. And they've come up with several plans to do that. This year, because of their work, it's going to be one of the rare years that we're actually going to fall below budget in SPED, which is great.
Okay.
I hope we continue to do the same next year. So, and we have plans for this year and next year and following year to continue with the trend to retain more and more kids in district and yet offer them all the services they require. I think if we can't build it all in 1 year, but over the few years we can do that. And once, we've got to get to a point where we're large enough of a system that we don't really need to send students out there unless they're very special cases. And if we do that, we give them the proper care. It's a win-win for all. It's a win for the city because we save lots of money doing that, and it's a great win for the parents because their kids can have all the services they want and yet be right next to home, as opposed to driving, a whole hour in the morning to go wherever they need to go and an hour in the afternoon.
Okay, the SPED budget is special education, right?
Yes.
Right, okay. There are some, I was talking to one of your people here, and there are some interesting motions on this week's agenda, and I wondered if you wanted to speak on any of them. But
I'll try.
Are there any that are worth mentioning that are just kind of there?
Well, there are few motions, as you know, like every week. I'm not really sure which one you want to cover,
Okay.
but any one of them, I'm happy to try to answer if I have any answer.
How is the citywide parent council working out? Is that?
Yeah, it's. I think we're still working very closely together. We're meeting regularly. I know next week we have a meeting. We meet, I think, once a month with the leadership, with of the council, and then we always meet before they meet with the citywide, and then they would invite us to participate in their meetings, whatever they want to cover. We're always happy to help them. One time it was about cafeteria, another time it was another topic, and so on. They bring us the topic, and we give them whatever assistance we can.
Okay, but the school district, the whole idea of the school district seems to me to have changed in the last 20 to 30 years. What we expected to be done 20 or 30 years ago with our students when we sent them to school is not what is expected to be done now. Do you find that there is a great deal of dependency by parents on the school system that wasn't there before?
I'm not really sure whether it's an increased dependency of the parents or it's more that we're seeing now there is more and more transparencies. So the parents are getting more and more involved with all aspects, which I believe is a good thing. I think it's a great thing for advocacy at the community level when you're advocating your schools, that parents be as informed as they can be. And I think it's a good thing too because they've become much more engaged partners with you because the child is only with us for a few hours, and if the more engaged they are, the more they can continue that learning at home. So I'm a strong believer that there's nothing better than transparency and continued engagement of the parents. But it is different. It is different. When I was a kid, my parents would send me to school, and come back from school and you do the best you can, but that was, maybe they'll see the school once a year. They'll go into an event, a school event or something, whereas now parents are more involved. And some are more than others, but as I said, I think it's much more a result of the transparencies, because schools are a lot more transparent now and engage the parents more. And we have, as you know, regulations, new regulations, and these reforms that demand that. You know, the ed reform calls for that. They call that every school should have a council that is made up of parents, teachers, and administration. These are the three different parts of that support system, the tripod to support the school.
Okay, now we still have the two zones for transportation, right?
We do, yeah.
Yeah, so we still follow that.
Right there on the map.
Oh, it's on the map. Okay,
Yeah.
there we go. Well, that was pretty quick. Okay, the transparency. I see a great difference between this kind of repetitive, but I see a great difference between the old system and what parents do seem to expect now. And I'm wondering what role the charter school has in that.
Well, I think the charter school is a choice. It's a choice for the parents. That just a way to give the parents a choice where they want to put their children. I think initially the intent behind charter school may have been, or at least partially, if not all of it, but partially may have been to try to find some niche areas where it is a lot easier for a smaller entity that's independent entity, more flexible, to deliver a better service. Some flexible. Now today we see more charter schools of different forms. There are still those that specialize in certain areas and work as complements to the public schools. I think now we see some charter schools that are more general education, really duplicating what the public schools are doing. There still are a choice. They're a choice for the parents, and those for, I think those, and I'm not against charter schools in that sense. What we're all calling for is when it comes to charter schools, particularly those that don't serve a specific need. They are more like a general need school, general schools, so that they be held to the same constraints we are. Mm-hmm. We do not turn away students. Right. If you live in Lowell, you attend school. Whether we have space or we don't have space, that's not your concern. You will have a guaranteed spot in our schools. We also, doesn't matter whether you come from any part of the city, we're obligated to deliver the same quality of schools. Whether you have special needs or you don't have special needs, whether you need special language support or you don't, it doesn't matter. You're Lowell students, you're entitled to a free education, and we deliver that. So where some charter schools may not necessarily function and do the same, and they tend to be a little bit more selective, if I may use that word, or in their choices of students. And so all we're saying is that they be really treated the same and be held to the same constraints that we have to work with.
Okay,
the criteria.
I was reading in an education magazine that the little girl who won the spelling contests and the geography contests last year was the same girl, and she came from a homeschooling situation. What can you describe homeschooling for me a little bit in terms of?
Well, homeschooling, we approve homeschooling here at the school level. School committee, you've seen us maybe in the meetings where we bring those requests of homeschooling to be approved, but that's a formality. That's an administrative formality. You know, in America, you have the right to educate your kids. You know, right. That's, nobody can take that right away from you. And there are some homeschoolers who do really well. They're very concerned parents and very engaged, and they follow very rigorous programs, and they do well. I mean, that's the ideal of learning, if you wish, is one-to-one. Is mom or dad teaching the one child at the time that they're working with. So if mom and dad who are helping the students, they can do really well. It doesn't mean that if they're homeschooling that they're gonna miss out on good education. I don't think there's any correlation there. However, not everybody can do homeschool. You work, I work, he works, everybody works, and they have to. We are obligated to provide. Yes, exactly, to provide education for to those children. And again, homeschooling, for whatever the reason may be, you have some really good homeschooling and you have some really lousy one too. I've seen cases, not here, it's too soon, but I've seen cases in other places where I've been where the children come in supposedly 6th grade of homeschooling, and then they go on to your middle school 7th grade, and you can barely pull a 4th grade level out of them because they haven't really received a good education. So there is good and bad. There are good deliveries and bad deliveries in both models. But by and large, homeschooling, charters, and all of these represent choices which parents deserve to have.
Okay, well, my last question for you is, can you review some of your key accomplishments so far in Lowell? How have you been doing?
Well, I think we've been doing, we're doing great. Some of the things that we've been working on is definitely, we're still on target with that strategic plan. And we were talking earlier about the budget, and one of the important aspects of the budget that we didn't talk about is that it is really aligned with our goals that we're building for the strategic plan. Essentially, trying to support our own strategic plan and not just have an orphan document by itself. So that's I think is a key one, because it would have been, by the time we complete it, would have been done in really record times. And I think another a good accomplishment is the budget itself. I mean, it's absolutely not to overlook. There's been a lot of good work put into that budget. It isn't always that you walk away with a budget for an institution of our size of $183 million of budget, not even counting, if you count the grants and you include the grant, that's over $200 million budget, where potentially you could have a balanced budget with nobody losing their job. That's really very, very important to point out, I think, and with the increases that we had in the last round of negotiations. So that's very significant. I mean, of course, the credit doesn't go all to us only. The credit goes to us, goes to the city, goes to the state, partly for supporting us with better funding. But altogether, it just shows you how when we all work together, we can make it happen without much pain, and we can continue in the growth that we have without much pain. So this is another huge accomplishment. I think the advances we're making in ELLs, those are definitely noticeable and significant. The improvements in SPED, and we can see that through the cost savings, and as we continue, we will demonstrate more and more significant cost savings in special education while maintaining the quality. Those are absolutely significant and big pluses of this administration. And lastly, I think maybe not to the same academic value, but I think there is. I think it has some credit that could be tied up and benefits tied up to the academic progress is the lunch program. I know most people had supported the decision that we took to go with the CEP program to offer most people had, but I know there were some people who didn't support it, and we can see the benefit of it now when all the children are well fed, and you can see that there's less stress, there's less problems to worry about in terms of whether this kid had eaten well, had eaten a good breakfast or didn't, and we can focus on what we're supposed to do, which is educate the children. and make sure that they're all ready to learn. So that's also, I think it was again, it's not just us, it's partly thanks to the programs that we have at the federal level and state level to allow us to have things like that.
It's interesting to note that when you did make, when you did offer some cuts in the budget, they were administrative. Is that?
We do. Most of our cuts are, the real cuts are really administrative. And I think what we try to do is what I told my staff when we started working on the budget is like, don't come back to me with cuts because of the budget. Forget the budget for a minute. Yes, we do have to balance the budget, but we'll balance it as a consequence of efficiencies as much as we can. Mm-hmm. I think what we try to focus on is really realigning the way we work as administration, and then realize those efficiencies to help cut the budget. And that's what we have done. Mm-hmm. We didn't go out and say, oh, I need to cut $500,000, so where do we cut? No, we said, how can we become more efficient? And what's the result of that? Mm-hmm. Is that saving us $500,000? Great, because that's going to go toward meeting, balancing the budget. That's exactly what we did. I think it was really toward the very end when we had that last $500,000 to catch up with to balance the budget, where we said, all right, let's now look at what retirees are going out that we could afford not to replace, or if we have to replace them, maybe we could move people around because of they might have the right certifications, and see where we can do that. Right. So I can say that with total confidence that a good portion of these cuts, of the 70% or 60-70% of them that we really looked at them initially, not necessarily to meet a budget cut, but to realize efficiencies, which tells you one thing, that even if we didn't have to cut the budget, we would have still sought these to be done, because I think it was a way for us to deliver better service to the schools from a central office. The realignment of curriculum that we're doing delivers more implementation to the schools, which they wanted to do. I mean, all principals together, all of them prefer that. They prefer that we become more and more of coordinating, if you wish, coordinators, true coordinators, and support services, but they worry about the implementation in the way they see it best fit. Okay. And that's really what our realignment is all about. So even if we didn't have to cut the budget, you probably would have seen us submit these realignments. Okay.
This has been Jim Peters. Today we're interviewing Dr. Salak Kafali of the Superintendent's Office, the Superintendent of Schools. And as you know, you never know who you're going to see on Peters Principles, so keep watching. Thank you.
Thank you.